Arlene and Ken speaking about cruising in Maine, and take it away.
Good evening, everybody. Arlene is next to me. I don't know if you can see her. Get your refreshments ready. And please, if you haven't already, mute yourselves. And as a legal notice, we're going to be recording this. So for those of you who need to know it, you know it. And if you have a question, either type it in the Q&A or just unmute yourself and ask. We're not doing anything very formally. And I think that's all the preliminaries. So welcome to our presentation of our 2019 trip to Maine aboard Forever Young. It was our second sailing trip to Maine. We did it in 2016. And in addition, in 2004, we drove up to Penobscot Bay where we chartered a Pearson 28 out of Camden for a week. Both of our sailing trips to Maine were with the Corinthians, and we've been cruising with them since 2015. The Corinthians are a boating organization with over 400 members up and down the East Coast. And each of the Maine cruises had approximately 40 boats and about 100 people. We've enjoyed our association with the Corinthians because it expanded our cruising horizons and because we made some wonderful friends. We may not have undertaken the prior trip if we were alone. However, the year before, 2015, we went to Boston with the Corinthians. And that gave us the confidence that we could get far enough to meet up with other Corinthians along the way. The previous winter, we had installed AIS so we could see other boats which were near to us. The range is about same as VHF radio, or about 25 miles. And in addition, we found we could always hear Corinthians traveling in groups on the VHF, so we could see our friends as we were going up. For an overview of the trip, we were out 59 days. We spent 5 nights at docks, and the balance was split about equally between moorings and anchor. We made a lot of additions and modifications to the boat since we purchased it new in 2012. So it's comfortable for us to live on for the 2 months at a time and to travel the distances we cover. I want to thank Frank Lopresti for his technical help and providing the charts. This is the beginning of the trip. You'll see that we started here, and we just basically we went out to the Bight in Northport. We went over to Charles Island. Then we went into Peconic Bay. Give you more detail on that. Then we went up to Port Judith, Hadley Harbor here in Massachusetts, and then through the Cape Cod Canal up to Scituate to Marblehead. That was the first probably 2 weeks of the trip. So here's Arlene at the helm. And this is the first night. Some of my pictures aren't that good, but that was our first night at the Bight in Eaton's Neck. The next night, we were at Charles Island, which is not very well protected, but it's very, it's just easy in, easy out. So a lot of the boats you see there, boats come in there after dark and they're gone before the sun comes up. This is just a quick place to come in and out. And we've had a lot of fun there. This is Hadley Harbor, which is one of the real jewels of places to stop. It's a 360-degree protected anchorage in the middle of the Elizabeth Islands. It's right near Woods Hole. It's a wonderful place. It's you can't go ashore
We've been there.
because the islands are all private. They're owned by the Forbes family of
Maybe you weren't
Boston.
on the boat.
And this is they have a boathouse. You'll see later, they have a ferry that comes and goes. And it's really a beautiful spot. This is New England fog in the morning. But we've learned that we can deal with it. This was not a problem for us. If we could see this far, we can get
No
around
young members,
between the radar, the chart plotter, and the AIS.
no new members of the club.
We move around. If anybody's, I hear some talking. If anybody wants to ask a question, speak up louder.
That was Frank.
Oh, okay. And from there, we went through the Cape Cod Canal, and we went up to Situate, which is a very big, crowded, busy harbor just south of Boston. We stayed at the Situate
Resolve had rocks thrown
Yacht
at
Club,
by kids. No, not Resolve.
and we stayed there a couple of days. Good place
On
to
that
provision, and
pile
there
of
were good
rocks in the
restaurants.
back,
Yes, Frank.
were throwing rocks at us.
Frank, could you mute yourself, please?
What?
Could you mute yourself?
I'm sorry, I'm not muted.
Well, we hear you talking. My son lives in Boston, and he came over with his wife and daughter, and they spent an afternoon with us. And then we went to Marblehead. This is the Corinthian Yacht Club in Marblehead and Marblehead Harbor. It is just an absolutely beautiful place. Very, very crowded harbor, and a very elegant yacht club. The town was all decked out for an Adam Sandler movie that was being filmed there that week. And it was decked out as a Halloween scene. And from there, from Marblehead, I think this taskbar is in the way, but right over here is Marblehead down here. And right, if you could see my pointer, is where Gloucester Harbor is. We went through Gloucester Harbor, we fueled up, and then there's a river and a canal that go up into Ipswich Bay. And we went through there. It's very pretty, but it's just boring motoring through, and we'll probably never do it again unless there's bad weather out here on the outside that we want to avoid. But we had a great, one of the best days we've ever had sailing here up in Ipswich Bay. And then we went to the Merrimack River to Newburyport. And as we went up the river, it's a very, it's probably about a 5-mile trip, maybe a little more. And again, it's just motoring. The river is very wide, but there's very shallow water. It's a very narrow channel. And the whole way up, we had an escort. Yeah, an escort from the local harbor patrol. And we weren't sure if she was following us to see if we would get in trouble or if she was leading the way. You know, she'd be in front of us, behind us, next to us, but she was with us basically the whole time. Very, very nice town, gentrified, restaurants, very accommodating. They have a couple of town moorings, and we had a good time there. Just one night. We didn't spend a lot of time there. There's not that much to do. From there, we went up here to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, spent the night, and then bounced over 7 miles off the coast is Isle of Shoals, which is an absolutely beautiful set of islands off the coast of New Hampshire. And the Portsmouth Yacht Club maintains some moorings, and it's first come, first served for the members. And if nobody's using it, anybody else can. And this is a resort hotel on the island, on one of the islands. And we thought it was going to be very quiet, but they had a fire drill. And it was just making a lot of noise and hundreds of people coming out of the hotel. But this is what we actually started meeting Corinthians here in this harbor. on their way up to Maine. This is the Kennebunk River. To go back a couple of slides to the chart, here's the Kennebunk River, Kennebunkport. And from there, we went up to Portland. And then I'll show you the rest on the next slide. When we got to Portland, we stayed at the Four Points Marina, which was brand new. It wasn't even finished. A lot of the docks didn't have electricity. They really weren't ready for us, but it was the beginning of the season. And that was,
And they had to put up 40 boats.
and they had to put up 40 boats and they were able to handle us. But I'm sure by now it's their third season coming up that they're going to be in really good shape. It's very well located, walking distance to the main shopping area and the restaurants, and it's really very nice. This is Gary Jobson. He spoke at opening night ceremonies on Saturday, July 20th. That was the beginning of the Corinthian trip. It's amazing the reach that the Corinthians have to get to people. The gentleman who organized, he was the cruise leader for this cruise, sailed with Gary in college. So they've been friends for many, many years. And Gary raced on Narragansett Bay that day and still came up to speak to us Saturday evening. And he's just a charming, funny guy. It was really very entertaining. The Corinthians do a couple of things in the morning, leaving the harbor. They do a parade, which is kind of funky to be in, but I'm sure it's nice to watch for the other boats.
And the people on shore.
Yeah, the people on shore. And there's usually a race, conditions permitting, from one harbor to the next. And this was the day that we were going from Portland to the next harbor, which was the Basin in the New Meadows River, which is a beautiful spot. We anchored in there, and some of us rafted up. We had people on board for dinner. This gentleman was with three other people on the yacht. They're from the Atlantic Highlands Yacht Club, and another couple was on the boat. They came up from Texas on their boat, and it's a small world. But two of the guys on the Najad from New Jersey were from Alabama. They were brothers, and they were in the same kindergarten class as the guy from Texas who had lived in Alabama as a kid. It was just a small world. It was really funny to have that happen. This is a navigational aid. You see a lot of weird things in Maine. They mark outcroppings with all kinds of things, and this is one of them. And you'll notice the bird on it. This is a lighthouse on a rock going into Booth Bay Harbor. As we entered Booth Bay Harbor, a couple who lived up there, Corinthians, they came out in their power boat. They were handing out goodie bags as each boat entered the harbor. It was really a very nice thing to do. Nice way to welcome us. Booth Bay Harbor Shipyard was a really interesting experience. They set up trips for us, a couple of boat yards, a garden, a museum, and everybody could pick where they wanted to go. This is a great shipyard. They're rebuilding the Ernestina, which is 100-something-year-old boat. And this lumber, this is inside the shed. This is the steam box where they moisten the lumber so they can bend it. And this lumber comes from 150-year-old forest in Norway that was planted to provide wood for the wooden ships. And the way they get this wood is it has to be a certified restoration project for them to cut down the wood and sell it to them. So it's kind of a big deal. And this is, give you an idea of the size of the Ernestina. This is a workman.
Next to the road.
Yep. And this is on the deck of the Ernestina. This is, that was in the morning. This is the afternoon. Washburn and Doty is a different kind of a shipyard. This is the newest Shelter Island ferry that goes from Greenport to Deering Harbor, I guess. They had just built it and it was about to be delivered. And this is pictures inside the shed, how they build the boats. And what they do is they build them in sections, weld them up together, and then weld the sections together. And when they start building, they're actually upside down. And then they're turning them around, and then as they build the sections. We got to tour this tugboat that was being finished. The finishing work was being done, and it was just really interesting. That night, we had dinner at the Booth Bay Harbor Yacht Club, and they really treated us well. The members of the club prepared the most sumptuous buffet, buffet hors d'oeuvres, hot and cold. It was really great, and they were very welcoming. And then we had dinner. Arlene and I were fortunate; we got to sit with the Commodore and his wife and some Corinthians, and we had a really very nice evening, a wonderful dinner. And the Corinthians hired a school bus driver to drive us back and forth from these venues because this yacht club is not near the center of town. So we didn't want to stay there. We stayed at the Carousel Marina where the movie Carousel was filmed. And we go back there every year. We're up there because we like the guy there, and it's a great place. Maine hospitality. He gives us his car and lets us use his freezer and things like that. And so anyway, our Burgee is now hanging in the Booth Bay Harbor Yacht Club. I sent one up to the Commodore. This was the school bus driver surprised us and showed up with his lobster boat to bring us back. So instead of riding a school bus, we went home in a lobster boat. And the next day we went to Pemaquid, which is a basin. I'll find a chart. I'll show you in the chart where it is. But the Pemaquid River, this is at the mouth of the Pemaquid River. Another beautiful anchorage in Johns Bay. And this is where we spent the night. This is actually, you see here, the entrance to the river over here. And it's an interesting place because this is there's a fort here, you'll see in a minute, that has been there for like 400 years. And it's been under the control of the US, France, England, the natives. So there've been the French. And so this fort has been there, and they have a museum. It's now a state park. And they have these people who dress like they did in the old days. And they show you how they lived and the tools they used and things. It's very interesting. They're nice to talk to them. This is the fort at Pemaquid, right at the entrance to the harbor. This is the inside of it. And this is from the view from the top. And this is a parking lot. When we get together on, for drinks or dinner on other people's boats, This is how we get back and forth. This is our dinghy here in the lower left. And I think this was the night we went, our friend every year makes pizza on his boat and invites people over. And he has about 20 people in the cockpit on a Catalina 470. And these people live in on the boat year round. The woman is actually from Port Washington, but they met through the Corinthians. He was from the Chesapeake Bay area. And this is the shore over at Pemaquid. And just to show you, everybody isn't a sailor. This is one of the boats in the fleet that was going up there.
Part of the Corinthians.
Yeah, one of the Corinthians. And this just another lighthouse. They're all configurations. I take a lot of lighthouse pictures because they're just interesting. And I'm going to show you a slide. Oh, wait. All right. I'll show it to you afterwards. But this is Seal Bay. And this was up in Penobscot Bay. A very nice anchorage. It's a rocky bottom. There's almost nobody there. There's nothing on shore. And that's the one time I almost lost my anchor. It got caught in a rock. But fortunately, I had a trip line on it. So I was able to get it out. Otherwise, I think I would have had to leave the anchor in the chain there. But it's really a very nice place. Then we went to Rockland, which is a busy harbor. It's not really all that pretty, but we had the closing ceremony in the apprentice shop, which is a wooden boat school in Rockland. And the museum was closed. This facility, the school was closed. And we could just walk around and tour. They gave us tours. This is a sailing canoe, not exactly like the ones that we use at our club or used at our club, but it is a sailing canoe hanging on the wall. You can see it. This is a tenant. Excuse me. This was the next one morning in Rockland. And to give you an idea, when we left Pemaquid, we went to Tennant's Harbor, which is down here. And then we, from there, we went around through here. This is, I think it's called Deer Island Thoroughfare, between the islands, and it's really very pretty. And then into this bay. This was Seal Bay on Vinyl Haven Island. And we stayed the night, and then we went back the next day to Rockland, and it was just great wind through here. This is a wonderful cruising area. This is all Penobscot Bay, and it goes up in here. It's beautiful. Every harbor is nicer than the last one. And when we got to Rockland, we stayed there for 5 days. The trip ended there on Saturday, the 27th, I think it was. And we stayed for a few days because my son and his family came up and rented a house. So we hung out with them for a few days. And then we started back by ourselves, I think on July 31st, it was Wednesday. We went here in Rockland, we went down to Port Clyde. We spent a couple of nights there. And then we took a ferry the next day on Thursday to Monhegan Island, which was really a nice thing to do. You can't anchor there. There's no room in the harbor. So you really have to go by ferry. And we rode the ferry on the ferry. I spent the whole time both ways up in the pilot house with the captain, who was a young guy who knew every nook and cranny in the area, but didn't know anything more than 25 miles away. He'd never been anyplace. And so he told us about Damaris Cove Island and another island, both of which have 2 moorings each. So you either get a mooring or there's not really any room to anchor. And from there, we went down to South Harpswell. And from there, we went to Biddeford Pool. And I'll give you a little more detail on that part of it. So this is Port Clyde. It's really a cute little town. There's only a few hundred people there in the winter. They have a general store.
Art galleries.
Oh, they have art galleries. A lot, college students working there for the summer. It's just a very nice, pleasant place to be. There's nothing there. It's typical
Other
Maine.
houses.
Typical Maine. And then we went to Monhegan Island, which is another place that's,
That's where we went by ferry.
yes, this is where we went by ferry. And no cars allowed on the island except the residents who were there. So whenever the ferry comes in, these trucks are there to pick up goods that have to be taken around the island, or baggage, or I guess they even move people around. And these are signs, the directions how to find things.
Like the restrooms.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. And this is the menu for one of the restaurants. It's just a piece of wood stuck in the ground. This is the harbor at Monhegan Island, which is really between 2 islands. We're on Monhegan, and that's the other island. There's a lighthouse that we climbed up. This is that other island where the harbor is in there. This is the library. And I took some nature shots. And there was a shipwreck on the far side of the island. Then we went to this Damaris Cove Island, which is really an unbelievable place. It's shaped like a tooth. The harbor is very narrow. It's maybe 150 feet wide, maybe 300 yards long at most. That's it. And it looks bigger than it really is. When you go to turn the boat around, you realize how small it is. Of course, the advantage to Maine is there's a lot of rocks and it's steep shore. So it's not like here where you have a sloping shore. Usually you can get pretty close to shore with the boat. So there's a fair amount of room there. And there's these floats at all the way in the harbor. That's the keeper's house. There are 2 guys live there. They're employed by the Booth Bay
Preserve.
Land Trust, or whatever, the people who own the island and run it, which is, they're a big organization up there. And these 2 guys live there for the summer, running the place. And these floats, they rent out to lobstermen. And at night, when they bring their boats back, they tie them up and they sit out here and they barbecue and have dinner and whatever. And they have 2 of these dinghies tied up at the dock. So if you want to go ashore, you kind of do a touch and go at the dock, pick up a dinghy, bring it back to your boat if you don't have one, and then you can row ashore. It's all very friendly. Is the keeper, one of the keepers. They don't charge for the moorings. So, I made a donation to them. That got me on their mailing list. I got their annual report and found out they're sitting with millions of dollars in the bank. So they really don't need the money, but they do a good thing. They really do a nice thing up there. And this is another shot of the harbor. We hiked up. This is looking across the entrance to the harbor, looking from east to west. And this part of the island is the only part that's privately owned. This house used to be the lighthouse, and I guess the Coast Guard sold it off or whatever, and it's now privately owned. And the owner of the house maintains his own moorings over here, but they're private, and we were there during the week, so people were using them. But apparently on the weekends when he has parties, he doesn't, he takes them for himself. And while we were there, they were installing a floating dock because the boat ramp, at low tide, there was no water. So they were putting in floats to take, so you could get in and out at any tide. And these are the lobstermen later in the afternoon on that dock inside the harbor. From there, we went to, we were headed for an island, for an anchorage on our way to, we didn't want to go into Portland. We don't particularly like Portland because you can't anchor in there. And so we were looking for a nice anchorage. And all of a sudden, we were in, this is Casco Bay, is east of Portland. And it's loaded with islands. And Arlene looks out and sees a bunch of sailboat masts. So she decided we should go there. So we looked on the cruising guide and found a marina called the Dolphin Marina. They had a mooring available, and it was just a wonderful place to stay. It's been in the family for 120 years. The guy's great-grandmother bought the property in 1902 or something. And after World War II, his grandparents turned it into a marina. His father ran it. Now he runs it. And his daughter is like 15, 16 years old. She runs lobster tours on her whaler. And they make, it's called the Dolphin Marina. It's in Potts Harbor in South Harpswell, Maine. And they make, the thing is they make blueberry muffins. With every meal in the restaurant, you get a blueberry muffin. And in the morning, the launch comes out with blueberry muffins and coffee. And it's gratis. It's all gratis. The blueberry muffins are gratis. And they're just very nice. And what's really interesting, we needed bread. So they gave us the pickup truck for a couple of hours to go for a ride. This is common up there. And it turns out that what you're looking at, those two slides, is a state park that in World War II, they had underground caverns they were using to store fuel oil for Navy ships. The Navy ran the facility. And they would bring the fuel oil up to Maine to store it. And from there, they would load it on tanker ships to take it to refuel the ships at sea, or to get it over to Europe or North Africa, wherever it had to go, to support the military effort. And those are the bollards, the original bollards. And they put, floats in, swimming beach, just a very nice park. This is the, from the restaurant at the Dolphin Marina, this is looking out towards south, towards Casco Bay. And it's just this big lawn. It's just a beautiful place. Then from there, we went to Biddeford Pool, which we kind of like. It's outside the Saco River. It's, you anchor or moor outside, and then you take the dinghy in. We stayed there a couple of days, just relaxing, nothing to do. And the third day when we got up, we started the engine, got about 200 yards, and it started overheating. But I was in the channel and there was a current, so I dropped the anchor while I checked things out, and couldn't figure out what was wrong. The strainer was okay. So we called the yacht club, and they're not allowed to tow anybody. And there was no place in the Saco River that could handle a boat that drew as much as ours. They just have small power boats there. So we called Sea Tow, and they came down to tow us back to our mooring. But because it was from Portland, 25 miles out on the outside, but it was too rough and windy for them to tow us back to Portland. So they said, we'll come down and we'll tow you to your mooring, or, to a mooring. And then we'll come back tomorrow and tow you to Portland when the weather's better. And that's what they did. And this is their boat. It's a power catamaran that they had custom built the prior winter. And it's really phenomenal. And this is us being towed. You see the ocean was a little bit calmer than it was the day before. But it was, they towed us all the way back to Portland, took us into the marina where they have their boats repaired and where they keep them. And they were just very professional. They had the parts. I needed an exhaust elbow. They had all the parts. The mechanic got on the boat within a half hour, an hour after we got there. And before 5 o'clock, we were ready to leave, but we just hung around till the next morning. And then we left early in the morning. But it was just an interesting experience.
I think you should talk about Sea Tow being the towing company of choice up there.
Yeah,
Not-
Sea Tow is much better than Boat US or Towboat, whatever it's called.
It doesn't
Up there.
exist.
Yeah, they don't really have them up there. So we're members of both, and we have our primary insurance with Sea Tow. With Sea Tow, because we found they're better here and up there.
All of that service was free. That was included in
It's
our
in the
membership.
insurance. It's in the, yeah.
But that's amazing service.
Yep. There are schooners all over Maine, and it's really nice to see them. Just to let you know, I was on the trip also.
Check out the life jackets. Talk about that.
Oh, we wear our life PFDs whenever we're on the boat. And inside the PFD, we have a personal locator beacon, which if you go in the water, it activates, and we can see it on the chart plotter, so that if one of us should go over, the other one could find us again. Of course, we also have a strobe light and a whistle inside the PFD. So we went from, to sum this up, from Rockland down to Port Clyde to Monhegan Island to Dolphin Marina and Potts Harbor. We went to Damaris Cove Island first. Then we went back to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Well, from Biddeford Pool back to Portland, and then back down here to Portsmouth. And when we were going from Portsmouth to back to Salem, we hit a squall, like a microburst. So it was a little bit exciting for about 15 minutes. And this cape is where we were before. This is where Salem is. Marblehead is right in here, and this is Gloucester. So usually we go around the outside, but we went through the river and the canal this time just to do it because people said it was pretty. But like I said, we won't do that again, most likely.
Where was that hole that we went from the squall?
Right here. This was it, the squall.
No, but what was the hole?
Going into Portsmouth.
It wasn't Portsmouth. Or was that another trip?
I
Never
don't know.
mind.
Okay. So then we went back to Salem. Salem's one of our favorite places. We like to go in there. It's a nice town. It's a friendly brewer's marina. We've made some friends there. So we like to go back there. From there, we went to Situate, bypassing Boston Harbor. And again, we spent, I think we spent a day or two in Situate. From there, we went down through the Cape Cod Canal over here and back down to Hadley Harbor. Show you on this chart, down through the Cape Cod Canal, down Buzzards Bay, part way. This is Woods Hole and Hadley Harbor over here. And we spent a few days in Hadley Harbor. This is the chart plotter as we're going through the canal. And you see we're doing 10.4 knots over the bottom, which is almost a 4-knot difference. It's like going up and down the river, the East River. It's no real challenge. You just, if you time it right, you just go with the flow. And traffic is basically going in one direction. There aren't too many boats to try and fight it. So we got back to Hadley Harbor, and this is the family's ferry, the Forbes family ferry that, and it carries a pickup truck and, whatever. It's pretty big, has big capacity. These were friends of ours who we met in Hadley Harbor maybe 12, 15 years ago. And we become friends with them. We keep in touch with them year round. And they met us there. They used to be sailors, but they recently got this boat. And this is the island. They have these wild horses running around. It's really very pretty. See the rainbow? And so we came through Buzzards Bay, and we had spent the night in the Sakonnet River, which is on the east side of, it's east of here, on the east side of Newport, Rhode Island. We anchored there. We got up in the morning. It was a little foggy, but it cleared enough that we felt comfortable leaving. We went a few hundred yards and it just totally socked in again. So we dropped the hook and waited until it cleared, and then we were able to leave probably about noon. And from there, we went to Stonington, which was one of our favorite places. Then we went down to 3 Mile Harbor and Deering Harbor and Cockles Harbor. We spent a bit of time, probably close to a week, bouncing back and forth. Deering Harbor and Cockles Harbor, Shelter Island, and 3 Mile Harbor. All of these 5 miles, 8 miles. It's just nice to go for a sail and drop the hook someplace else and look at something different. This is 3 Mile Harbor, which is a big, wide open harbor once you get inside. We anchored there. They have some town moorings, which is some of the most expensive town moorings in the world. But we anchor because it's good holding ground, and we just feel comfortable on the anchor. There's really nothing to do there unless you want to go to one of the expensive marinas, which have very expensive restaurants.
Very expensive drinks.
Yeah. I once met a client and his wife there. The four of us, we had 4 drinks. It was $100. It was just ridiculous. Well, with nothing to eat, just drinks. But we found that there's a marina that has a dinghy dock all the way at the south end of the harbor. And we go in there, then walk about a half mile down the road. There's a pretty good deli. And, you can get prepared foods or some groceries. So we like it there. And this is the end. After cruising around there, we did our usual trips to Essex. And we went to we went back into 3 Mile Harbor, and then we went to Port Jeff, Northport, and home. And we got home like August 27th or something. We were out about 59 days, and it was just a great trip. And I thank you. Anybody have a question? Anybody there?
You have to unmute.
We're all jealous. I have a question.
Yes.
Arlene, what was your favorite part of the trip?
Well, two favorite parts. First, of course, the sailing aspect of it, and just being free and independent to just make decisions and be responsible to ourselves. I feel sometimes that my life is controlled by others, but when we're sailing
Not me.
like this, it's really an opportunity to prove to yourself that you can do it, that you can actually do it and enjoy it. So I would say that's the most important thing. Making friends along the way, just bumping into people and having them become friendships instead of just strangers on an anchorage or a mooring is also very important and wonderful.
Mhm.
I've got a question on the photographs. Arlene, did you take most of the pictures?
I didn't take any of them.
Oh, Kent, did you?
Yeah, well, there's only the two of us.
Ah, that's great. Some of the pictures I thought were very good.
Yeah, thank you. There's about 1,000 more if you have patience.
Well, I'll request a few later on.
The one picture of the purple daisies with the butterfly on top of one of the petals is certainly one of my favorites.
I see.
Not very nautical, but still a beautiful photograph.
Well, you must have taken the one that Ken's in.
Yeah, I think so, unless someone sent it to him. That's possible. The two of us are really quite camera shy. So, we just don't like to be in pictures necessarily.
I don't have an objection.
Well, you do. But anyway, so we generally take pictures of the scenery.
I have a lot of pictures of Arlene she won't let me show.
Yes.
I have a question about the length of your trip. Each day after you got to West Salem, or was it Salem, Mass, and you worked your way north, what was the average distance to the towns up the coast?
You mean from harbor to harbor?
Yeah.
Yeah, like on a given day, like a half a day sail kind of thing, or was it a whole day? I'm not sure. It was a scale.
We have, I don't think we've ever planned a trip more than 60 miles in a day. We try to keep it about 30 to 40 at most. And there are
Gotcha.
days we do 10-mile trips. It's just depends.
Yeah.
Again, when you're on your own, you can make those decisions. If we fall in love with the harbor, we stay for 2 days. If we don't like it, then we leave.
Nice.
But when Ken and I started talking about Maine, and this was many years ago, not the trip that we drove up to Penobscot Bay, but taking our own boat up to Maine, I said to Ken at the outset, I will never go on an overnight sail with you. I just won't do it. So whatever the itinerary is, when you navigate, we have to stop at night and sleep somewhere. And that's the deal. Some people say, well, we have to find a restaurant because we're not cooking. But in my mind, we just have to find a place to stop, sleep, and then continue the next day. And so, in the summer when there's a lot of daylight, it's easy to do because you can leave at 6 o'clock in the morning if you really want to. We don't generally do that. But you can sail until about 8 o'clock at night. So without a problem.
Very, very, very rare that we ever do anything like that. We'll leave early in the morning to catch a tide. But we're usually tied up by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at the latest.
Yeah.
So I understand there's a lot of ledges up there. These rocks that are underwater at high tide and they're exposed at low tide, and it's not like hitting sand in Long Island Sound. I'm wondering, did you have any difficulty navigating those, or did you ever hit one, or is it all as marked on your chart?
Well, what I usually do, I've gotten more experienced at it. What I did the first time going up was I would just look at the chart and I would go out of my way to avoid these weaving and winding between islands and ledges if
Yeah.
there were narrow passageways. And then following other people, I would deviate from the course that I set when I got close and saw that there was really a lot of room to get through. You know, when you're looking at a 20-mile trip the night before, and just to look at every square inch of it, it's somewhat of a daunting task. So I just pick an easy route, and then as I get closer, I'll deviate from it to take shortcuts. But the water's very deep. I mean, it's not hard to find 300-foot water up there.
But
Okay.
there also, can I just add that there, in the Corinthian group that we were with, there were 2 boats that got pretty damaged because they hit the rocks. And that was 2 different harbors. So it does happen. You have to be very aware. And of course, Ken didn't show you any pictures of lobster pots. But the lobster pots are everywhere, except
Well,
in
yeah.
very desolate, removed harbors that we found. But if you try and go, you know, if you find a place to go that has lobsters on the bottom, the lobstermen know about it. Those pots are everywhere, and those decoys are just,
Yeah, you don't want to sail at night.
it's crazy. And they also put them in the channels. They don't care where they drop a pot. So you're really bobbing around them all the time.
They're very dangerous.
We have a shaft cutter we put on for the last trip to Maine, you know,
The first,
on the shaft on the first trip. And last summer, because we knew we weren't going anywhere with COVID, we took it off. And I'll probably put it back on for this summer because we're going to stay mostly in Long Island Sound, but it could be lobster pots. I don't know if I'll see if I can get a reading on whether the lobster pots went back in, because with the warm water, there haven't been many lobster pots this far south, almost none.
Were you ever aware of hitting a line with your line cutter?
Oh yeah, in our dining room, those of you who've been in our house, in the dining room, there's a framed piece of line that we call our $50 trophy. That's what the guy charged us to cut it off. The cutter cut the line, but a piece of it had wrapped around the prop shaft. So I had to have the diver go down because, you know, it vibrated at anything over minimal RPM.
How cold was
What's the weather?
Did you swim in the water in Maine? Was it?
I don't swim in the water here. It's too cold.
no, it's, you know, climate change is what it is, but the Maine waters are still very frigid compared to what we're used to. There was that one place that Ken showed you where the bollards were for the oil, the diesel tanks underground.
Yes.
And that park, that state park, there was a raft and kids
Right.
were swimming. You could see, the photograph shows you that the kids are in the water.
Yeah, I saw that.
I would not go near that. No.
After 59 days, what would you each say was the creature comfort that you missed most and wanted to have aboard the next trip?
Can I speak first? You know, it's an interesting thing. Ken started this conversation with you saying that we fixed our boat, we've modified our boat to make it livable for the 2 of us, happily livable, and it really is. I mean, we've got 2 showers, we have an electric head, we have a galley that functions very nicely, and a charcoal, excuse me, not charcoal, but a gas-driven grill, barbecue grill outside. The only thing I would really like more is I'd like better sails. I'd like a light weather jib, you know, a drifter. But other than that, I mean, maybe in 2 or 3 years, I'll say electric winches, which we don't have. But both of us really feel that we're going to be sailing for many more years. So
How much did you use your windlass, and is it a electric windlass?
we don't have anything electric. Oh,
What
the
about your
windlass, I'm sorry, the anchor. Yeah, that's electric.
That's a lifesaver, because
Yeah,
I
that-
have,
it
I have
goes up.
200 feet of chain.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it without the windlass. That's
How
why
much
we have
chain?
What?
How much chain?
200. And it's really very secure. And you know, I've been very fortunate that I've never had a problem with anchoring because it's a good set of tackle. Of course, I just got a text on the phone from my boyhood friend who taught me how to sail and how to cruise. And he told me to make sure I mentioned the fact, the time that I caught a lobster pot on his boat. He had to bring it up.
So electricity wise,
I'm sorry?
you have, of course, from one of the pictures, you actually have a solar panel. And how many batteries do you have?
We have two 4Ds and a Group 27 starting battery
And 2 panels, 2
and
solars.
200 watts of solar.
Okay, so three batteries, and that should be actually enough to handle your windlass when you need it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I never use the windlass without the engine being on. And in it, we also have a high output alternator. So we could charge the batteries reasonably quickly. We don't use it as much as we used to. Now that we have the solar panels, it's not as important as it used to be.
We need the solar panels to also charge the batteries because we're running a powerful refrigeration system. And that's a real drain if we're sailing or certainly overnight in hot weather. It isn't so bad up in Maine because it's really quite cool. At night it's cold, but down in the Long Island Sound area, it's really hot and the batteries take a beating. So the solar panels really help to keep the refrigeration going properly.
I guess this is a dumb question, but do you have a television on your boat?
Nope.
No. This boat was built with a television option from Catalina, but we wouldn't even consider it no.
Our old boat came with one and we took it off.
But that was a used boat.
Well, my parents had a Catalina and it also it was built in for a microwave that they didn't take
We
either.
took it off the other boat also.
Yeah, we didn't do the microwave option either because those kinds of things almost require you to be at a dock or at a marina.
You can't use them if you're not at a dock and if you
So,
don't have a generator.
There's
900 watts.
we don't live that life. Our life is very simplistic. And Ken didn't mention it, or nobody even raised the question about food. Because when you're away for 2 months, I have to be pretty clever about how we eat. And it's not rice and beans. We have real meals. And we know, because we've been to many of these harbors more than once, we know where we can get a car. Somebody lends us a car. The marinas give you a car. They're very generous, so that we can drive to a supermarket or at least a little general store where we can pick up bread. Bread seems to be the hardest thing to keep for us because we eat a lot of it. We eat sandwiches for lunch every day. So there's a lot of canned goods, dried foods on the boat. But I cook from scratch. You don't have a choice because most boat freezers are so tiny that you can't keep too much frozen anything, which is why Ken mentioned that when we were at Carousel Marina, one of the big pluses is that the owner of the Carousel Marina allows us to take his car, go to the supermarket, so we buy fresh meat. I download it into smaller packages because I'm carrying a food saver with me, which is an electrical device. So I have to be in the lounge of the marina using the food saver to download it into smaller portions. And then he lets us put those food saver packages into his ice cream freezer, you know, where people buy an ice pop, into that little box. And overnight it freezes, and then we put it on the boat and leave. So, you know, you learn to adapt, and it's part of the fun. I mean, I don't see that as a chore. So it's good. Food is very interesting. And we always come home with a lot of food left. But there was one trip to Maine, I think we tried to figure it out, that in the 2 months we were, or 6 weeks we were away, the first trip.
No, we had
Or
about
7
7, 8 weeks.
Or between 6 and 8 weeks, we figured out that we ate restaurant meals about 5 times in that period of time. So I'm
And could
cooking, and Ken is grilling.
If
And
the
could you-
weather's good, we grill.
Geez.
And we
Could you
don't,
speak about navigation in a rock-bound area there? A little bit more about that. What was your best aid to navigation in those situations?
What do you mean by best aid to navigation?
Well,
You
what
mean
did you use
instrumentation?
aboard? Was a paper charts, chart plotter? Which would you suggest as the most helpful, most useful aid?
Well, I always have a paper chart in the cockpit with me, but I primarily use the chart plotter, of course, the radar, and
and the cruising guide.
well, yeah, the cruising guide, but the cruising guide, not so much in this, what I think you're talking about is, and then the AIS and fog to pick out other boats. It helps in conjunction with the radar to see what's where.
But entering a harbor, Ken is downplaying the cruising guide, but when you enter a new harbor that you've never been in before, the cruising guide helps you enter the harbor safely. They'll show you, you know, the difficult parts and talk about it very clearly.
Yeah.
And also in Maine, we don't use that. You know, there's the cruising guide to the, I guess, what's the company? The one for Long Island.
MapTech,
Is it MapTech?
the one we use down there.
Okay, so we don't use MapTech up in Maine. There's another cruising guide that's made for Maine, and it's a remarkable book that has practically every island, every harbor is discussed, and the charts are there. So it's very, very helpful to use that as part of the navigation process.
I didn't mention, speaking about navigation, when we went on the way up, we went 3 Mile Harbor, and from there we went to Point Judith. It was a absolutely gorgeous day. We had a great sail until about 5 miles before we got to Point Judith. And then the fog came in so thick we couldn't see anything. And we had a problem rolling up the mainsail. We couldn't get it in all the way. We have a problem with the roller furling on occasion. And so the fog wasn't lifting. We went into the Harbor of Refuge without ever seeing it.
Ken and I was very nervous, obviously. I'm always anxious. But I had never heard Ken say to me, I think we're inside the harbor. I think we're inside the Harbor of Refuge, but I can't see anything. And it was like, oh my God, are we really in it or we're not in it? So we decided we were in it. He could see on the radar, there were 2 or 3 sailboats to the right of us as we came into the harbor. So we drop anchor with enough distance so that we wouldn't bump into them or drag the anchor or whatever. But there's a lot of seagrass in the Harbor of Refuge, and our anchor wouldn't hold. So Ken brought it up, I think, 2 or 3 times, and it couldn't hold. And still, it's completely fogged in. We can see nothing. So we got the engine going, and we left the Harbor of Refuge in the same way we came into it.
Well,
and
then we could
ended up-
see.
Well, it was just lifting, and it was also dusk. So.
But we went up into the pond, into Port Judith
And we
Pond.
ended up on the gas dock of a marina overnight.
because there's no place to stay there. We learned on a prior trip that you could stay at the gas dock if you come in late in the day.
Right.
But, and then I was concerned about the sail being out. So there was somebody on the dock, we were talking to him, and he said, oh, I'll come back with my brother-in-law, we'll help you out. He lived a block or two away. And he and his wife and brother-in-law came back, and his wife I took her up, she went up on the bosun's chair, and she secured the sail.
With bungee cords.
With bungee cords. And of course, the next morning we woke up and the wind was blowing 20, 25 knots. And so it's a fishing harbor at Point Judith. We couldn't get nobody could work on a sail rigging up there. So we had to get to Newport. So we went out the next morning, and on the way to Newport, the wind blew the sail out of ripped the bungee cords, and had so much pressure on the sail that the sail freed itself, so we could then take it out all the way and roll it up all the way. And the next morning was Monday, and we found a sailmaker in Middletown, Quantum Sails. We took the ferry from Jamestown into Newport, and then an Uber, and the guy fixed the sail in an hour.
Ken looked like Santa Claus with his sack. So it was pretty interesting to see that, because again, sailing, the infrastructure for sailors is so amazing, because there was some kind of a regatta going on in Newport. The boats, big boats were
the 12 meters were racing.
They were racing all over the place. And yet when we called this sailmaker up, he said, come right over, I will fix it immediately. And he would, every sailmaker there was working on those racing boats. And yet they took the time, and they were just so gracious and allowed us to continue on our way the next day. It's really impressive.
By the way, to backtrack a second, the Harbor of Refuge, for those of you who don't know, is a triangular shaped piece of rock. They drop riprap in to create a Harbor of Refuge, with the point in the south, and the land of Point Judith is in the north. And on each side, the east and west side, there's a cut, so you can go in and out. And so we went in to between two rock walls without ever seeing them.
Been there, done that. It's funny, Ken, I listen to you and it makes me laugh, because I did a lot of this cruising with my family when I was young, but before all this technology. So when we were going to Point Judith and we were socked in pea soup, we could hear other boats, but we couldn't see them. And my job as a kid was sitting in the bow, ready for this, with a radio direction finder and a whistle in my mouth and a bell in my hand. And that's what I did. Radio direction finder, whoo, whoo, boom, boom. So I'm jealous you have radar and all that stuff now.
Ken, how many of the Corinthian fleet, or how many of the other sailors have actually a AIS-B instead of the A? Can they actually emit so that you can actually receive them?
I'm sorry, Robert, could you repeat it? I couldn't catch that.
Of course you can't. How many of the boats with whom you were sailing had AIS-B so that they could actually emit their position versus just a receiver?
Probably 2/3 of them.
2/3. So it becomes more.
2/3 at least.
So it becomes more and more common into the pleasure boating area.
Oh yes. Oh yes. I mean, when we put it on, the first time we took a Corinthian trip was in 2015. We went to Boston, and it just seemed, we saw what other people were doing, and it just seemed like a good thing to have. But we didn't get the AIS because of that. We got it because we decided to get the personal locator beacons. And oh, wait a minute. Yeah, so we needed the AIS receiver to be able to pick up the signal.
Yep.
But we didn't get the transponder. We just got the receiver. And we went to Maine, and while we could see our friends, they couldn't see us. So we, at the end of the season, we just upgraded.
You say the help for the $500.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I sold the other one.
the other question is, you were basically navigating with a fleet with the Corinthians, isn't
Just
it?
for the 1 week.
Huh?
Just for the 1 week we were with them.
Ah, okay. Wasn't it a little bit of pressure to go left and right in function of their schedule instead of just doing what you wanted?
We could, there were people who don't do the whole trip. They take a night off and do something else, or they need a repair. They take a side trip or stay in a harbor an extra night. It's not like you have to be there the whole week.
There was no pressure, Robert, and actually the activities that the Corinthians incorporate into the trip are so interesting. Like the other trip to Maine with the Corinthians, we had a private tour of the Hinckley boatyard, watching them build these boats from scratch. That's a once in a lifetime opportunity. Nobody's allowed in those buildings. And to see what Ken just showed you about the tugboat being built, and I went to an environmental science, climate change type of laboratory. So I chose to go to a science activity. Other people went to a botanical garden. These were very private experiences that we could never have arranged for ourselves.
Well,
So,
I tell you,
thing.
if you come with 2.5 million in your back pocket, I'm sure you can go to Hinckley.
Yeah,
but that's to order a boat.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So no,
Okay.
you really can't go to Hinckley. Hinckley has a boatyard in what is it? What
Southwest Harbor.
Southwest Harbor.
Yeah.
That's open to the public. That's just a repair shop.
I see.
Yeah, and Robert, if you go to Hinckley with 2.5 million in your pocket, you don't leave with the 2.5 million.
But you leave with one very pretty boat.
You have to have another 2 million for the electronics. I know.
Ken and Arlene, can you speak to how you first got involved with the Corinthians?
Yes.
And who they actually are, for those that don't know.
All right. Arlene belongs to an organization called the Transition Network, where she belonged to it. And she met a woman there who used to be a member of North Shore Yacht Club, and you probably met because she's come to the club with us, Leslie and David Wallen, who now have for many years belonged to Port Washington Yacht Club. And they are Corinthians, and they got us involved. And the Corinthians was started in 1934, in a day when boats were much bigger and needed a lot of crew. So it was started for the purpose of being a resource for boat captains to find crew and for sailors who didn't have boats to find rides. And even now, probably half the members do not own boats.
Oh.
And some of the people who go on the Corinthian cruises charter boats for the trip. They'll drive up, charter a boat for the week, and then drive home. Or they come as crew on somebody else's boat.
Yeah, the Corinthian trip to the Chesapeake, we didn't want to take the boat. The trip was in June, 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And we didn't want to take our own boat down there for our own reasons. So we chartered a boat with the Wallen family, the two of them. What was it, a 39?
It was a Jeanneau 42.
Okay. It was
44, something like that.
It was a nice boat. There was nothing wrong with it. And we
That's not true.
Well,
a lot of things wrong with it.
We won't go into what was wrong with it. Anyway, so we chartered from a company in
Annapolis,
and that was fine. There were other people who chartered as well.
I mean, that trip, the week plus a couple of days up and back, a day on each end, and the night before the trip started was like a 10-day trip. If we had to take our boat down, it would have been a month. maybe 3 weeks if we were lucky, but probably a month.
Yeah.
Do you pay dues to the Corinthians?
Yeah, it's like $135. It's not a big
And
deal.
somebody runs, and there's a board, someone runs it?
Yeah, oh yeah, there's a
Oh.
board, there's a master and a master's mate, and there's all kinds
There are
of.
also fleets. I mean, we belong to the Long Island fleet. And
There's a Chesapeake
and a New England fleet.
and a Mystic fleet and a.
Yeah, there are all kinds of fleets. I mean, the trips, the Corinthians, we've met Corinthians who have become our friends. They live in Texas. There are people in Georgia that come up for these trips.
Can anyone join the Corinthians, or do you need to be
Anybody.
sponsored?
No,
Do
you
need-
have to, no, Ken.
Yeah, you have to be sponsored.
You have to be sponsored.
And it's an interesting thing. It's really interesting because they want to make sure that the crew people are qualified to sail on somebody's boat. They
Right.
don't want you to just come along and get hurt or hurt somebody else. So you have to be sponsored by people who know that you could sail, who vouch for your sailing ability.
Hmm. It's interesting because you own a Catalina, and my dad used to own a Catalina, and there's a huge Catalina rendezvous that goes on too. We went to many of them,
Right.
where you all convene in one place, and people also flew in. And like we got talking about being qualified, we were racing, and we got a couple on our boat from, I don't know, somewhere in California. We're lucky they didn't kill themselves. They were so bad. But
Well, that's an interesting thing. Because it could happen. And I've heard stories like that. But in fact, those of you who listened to the presentation a couple of months ago from Tom Hughes on his oyster around the world, he had crew at some point during the trip that was really not competent, that wasn't doing the job.
And he's a Corinthian also.
It turns out he's a Corinthian.
But also, there's another thing about the Corinthians. They have a sister yacht club in London, England, and it's called the Little Ship Club. And every other year, we're either invited to sail with them over in Europe, or the Corinthian membership can go over there and be guests of theirs and sail on their boats. And then they come to the United States. So I became pretty close to a Corinthian on the Chesapeake trip, and being crew for another boat is something I actually experienced because Ken drove home and I went on a 52-foot Starkman Stevens sailboat and crewed for a woman captain who's a member of the Corinthians. And we were an all-women's crew. We were 5 women that took the boat from the Chesapeake up to Long Island. And it was exciting, but here's the deal. So I really got close to this woman from England who was part of the crew, the women's crew. And when I crossed the Indian Ocean last December, 13 months ago, there were Little Ship Club members on the Queen Elizabeth that I didn't know. And yet this friend of mine, Debbie, put me in touch with this couple, and I was traveling by myself. Ken didn't go. So it was nice to be able to have lunch with people every day that were fellow sailors.
so if you wanted to join the Corinthians and you didn't want to take your boat somewhere, you could be a crew on someone else's boat.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And when they announce the cruise, you sign on either as a captain or as crew.
And we have one of the smallest boats on most of these trips. There's a 30-foot Catalina. There's us, and then there were about 5 Catalina 470s. But the number's down. Some of them have been sold. But other than that, you don't see Catalinas. You don't see Genots or Beneteaus. You see Packets and Sabres and all kinds of boats that we don't necessarily see around
Blue
here.
water boats.
Hinkley's. There's all
Yeah,
kinds of
they're
really,
lovely.
really beautiful boats, custom built boats.
That's a tribute to the quality of Catalina.
Yeah, well, I'm not complaining about the boat. I'm just saying that the boats on the Corinthian zone tend to be more substantial blue water boats.
What does Corky have?
Oh, Hylas.
Hylas.
Guys,
A few Hylas.
there's a Hylas 47 center cockpit that's absolutely gorgeous.
No, I don't think so.
It's like a hotel.
And they take on crew. He and his wife take on crew.
So, I mean, people who are interested in the Corinthians, let me know. I think it's a wonderful adjunct to the yacht club.
I'm interested because I have a daughter that doesn't want to sail, so I can't go cruising anymore. And I cruised my whole life. So I would love to do something like that.
Well, once you have to be sponsored and you have to prove basically that you're seaworthy, that you know how to sail.
Well, the sponsors will attest to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's not like you get a test. It's not like the share boat, with a laser.
Right.
No, I think it's fascinating. I didn't even know that existed, that you could crew for other people. That's wonderful.
Yeah, it is.
Well, truthfully, the Corinthians have the same problem that we have at North Shore and all the boating community has, and that is we need members. So part of my reason for doing this was I wanted to promote the Corinthians because I think that the culture of our club, people just don't want to cruise together. We as try as we might, we haven't been very successful at it. So this is a way to do it.
Well, I think that because people in our club don't want to go that far, they don't take the time you took. They're not taking 60 days. They're taking a week, 2 weeks at the most.
Right. That's correct. I mean, it's,
I mean, that makes us, Ken and I, a sailing couple that's rather unique because Ken obviously is still working, but he has a phone with him and he's got his laptop and he's got his portable printer and his hotspot and everything else he needs to do business. And, he takes his calls in the morning and after that it's over till the next morning. So it works for us. And I don't work anymore. I'm completely retired. So it does work and we have that kind of time. But most people don't, it's true.
Oh, that was a good day.
Could you talk a little bit about how much you motored versus how much you sailed?
Too much.
Yeah.
You sailed too much.
No. My good friend Stu, why don't you speak up instead of sending me texts?
Wait, is Stu on here somewhere?
My friend Stu is on the Zoom.
He's on the call. Stu, you're hiding. I see a picture of, I don't know what. Stu Abraham?
Yeah, that's
What
him.
is that, Stu? Unmute yourself. Tell us what's going on. How do you know Ken?
It is a side fin of a whale.
It's a whale broaching. Well,
Yeah.
actually, that one is a whale with its mouth open, eating anchovies as it comes up from the bottom. We saw that in Mexico off of Nuevo Vallarta.
Nice.
It's quite something.
So Stu, how long have you known Ken and Arlene, Stu?
How long have I known them? Well, I've known Kenny since we were in what, 5th grade, 4th grade?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
10 years old.
Yep. So, and I've known Arlene as long as Kenny's known her.
Almost.
Well, you know how long you've known him because you're calling him Kenny.
Of course.
That is very true.
But Stu taught me how to sail. He went through about 5 boats in his life, and we did a lot of sailing together, and been great.
Where do you live, Stu?
I'm in New Jersey, outside of Freehold.
Oh, I'm from Redback.
There were many years my wife and I would come up the East River and then pick up Kenny and whoever. And so I have to be careful.
Whoever, whatever her name was, whoever.
But
Well, you
yeah,
know,
I think
Kenny, you're Kenny from now on.
Whatever.
well, the best lesson Kenny ever learned was he had a Catalina 22 with an outboard. And I still remember the day the tiller broke. And he didn't know how he was going to steer the boat.
It was the rudder. It wasn't the tiller.
The rudder broke off. So I was having a great time trimming the sails to steer the boat. And then Kenny said, you know, we really ought to get home. So I said, why don't you start the engine? He said, why didn't you tell me that before?
Stu, I have a Catalina 22 right now.
Fun boat.
It is fun. It's a Capri. I got the high mast, but yeah, it's fun.
I had a Catalina 25 that I took up to Boston.
Oh,
Wow.
Frank.
That's a slow boat to China.
He didn't get to China. He got to Boston.
did you take the canal?
Hmm?
Did you take the canal?
Yes,
Smart move.
but maybe you remember years ago, I think, are they still on? We did a circumnavigation of Cape Cod with they were logged on earlier.
Members?
Yeah, members. We wrote an article even.
The Wolins? The Wolins? Leslie and David?
I'm forgetting who they live in Queens or
The Kovaches.
Oh, the Kovacs.
The Kovaches.
Kovaches. Yes.
They're on the call.
They were on the call. I don't see them anymore, but
Yeah, we did a circumnavigation of Cape Cod.
Wow.
oh.
That's a big trip.
That is.
Mm.
With Warren. Warren was with us.
Warren
Really?
Greenhouse.
So how many boats were you in?
Hmm?
Were you in one boat?
That was on a New York 36.
All of you on one boat?
There was only four of us.
Oh my gosh, these are too many. Oh wow.
And the Kovaches were intrepid crew.
They are.
Mm.
They are. Wow.
So for those who are interested, for this year, the Corinthians are starting in Deering Harbor on July 24th. And they're going to Sag Harbor, 3 Mile Harbor, Cockles Harbor, Stonington, ending up in Stonington on Saturday night, July 31st. So they're going to be close this year.
How many boats would they expect on a trip like that, Ken?
That's very close.
I'm sure they'll get 40 boats. If
Wow.
unless this
40.
COVID thing is a problem.
Wow.
But usually they limit it to 40 boats because you get beyond that, you just can't get facilities. You know,
Even with 40 boats.
with 40 boats, you're talking about 100 people or more. Plus you get some people who show up for a dinner or whatever. You just can't get those kind of facilities to do it, you know? So they usually limit it to about 40. I think the most I've ever seen was 45 boats.
Kenny, did they ever think about taking a winter trip to the BVIs or the
They do.
Grenadines? They
Yeah,
do.
They were supposed to do one in January, but you know,
Right.
COVID
'Cause
canceled that. And
Well, because that's a lot of fun. I'm sure maybe Carlo did it, but we used to belong to the Manhattan Yacht Club, and we used to charter boats in the Grenadines or the BVIs and take a whole big flotilla down in the winter, and it's a lot of fun.
yeah, I'm sure it would be.
But those were with kids. I'd prefer to do it with adults now. Not kids, but young, they used to be young adults. I'm an old adult now.
Just invite Kenny.
Ken, what were the dates of that Corinthian trip in Deering Harbor start?
July 24th to July 31st. Trips usually go
Short
Saturday. I'm sorry?
Mary Lou, you gonna take Old Flame?
No, but I was wondering if it would conflict with the International Canoe Regatta thing, which is July 11th, 12th, around there, I guess.
Yeah, it's
It
fingers crossed.
the trips usually run Saturday to Saturday. So most people show up Friday night, Friday. The activities start Saturday with the first, with an opening dinner event or whatever, like it was Gary Jobson
Captain's meeting.
with
Awesome.
this captain's meeting. There's usually some kind of a dinner and a speaker. Other events during the week. One night when we're at anchor, they usually have a dinghy race. It's a two-handed race. You must have two people in the boat. Each person can only put one hand on an oar and must have the other hand on a drink. It's a very
And
interesting race.
Ken, every year you guys get to go to the New York Yacht Club.
Yes.
Well, we haven't done it, but
yes.
yes, they usually have the dinner at the New York Yacht Club, the Christmas dinner. Another event they have is in November. They have a luncheon at the Beach Point Club up in Mamaroneck, which is the annual meeting and a lunch. And it's really a very nice day. And there's always a speaker. One year, one of the members spoke about his 3 months circumnavigating Cuba. People do kind of interesting things.
Sounds like it.
Well, it's again because they have blue water boats. I
Yeah.
mean, they're very substantial boats,
Yeah.
and these people are expert seamen.
Right.
They
This guy who did Cuba, that's a custom boat that he bought from another member of the Corinthians. And the boat has enough solar power that he can run his some of his air conditioning on it. He can run it in one cabin. It's a 47-foot boat.
Wow.
So, some of these are very interesting boats.
Okay.
And there are power boats. There's some huge, one guy has a 54-foot trawler. That's the guy who originally owned that custom boat. Another guy has about a 48-foot Sabre flying bridge. Gorgeous boat also. There's some beautiful boats and beautiful, gorgeous sailboats also. But
Are the people, what is the age range of most of the people that do these long trips?
very compatible with the North Shore Yacht Club. We're all but there are people bring their grandchildren. Their children and grandchildren come on board with them. It's basically a mature crowd, but there's all ages.
Sailing is a mature crowd if you think about it.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. But it has to be. Who else has the time and the money?
Exactly.
There was an article, Boat US had an article this month. It was really fascinating. This guy and his wife were power boaters, and they decided to get into sailing. And they got into sailing. They bought like a 20-something foot boat, and then decided they wanted. Oh, it was in the Catalina magazine. Maybe it wasn't in. Maybe it wasn't in the Boat US magazine. But they bought a small Catalina. Then they bought a 320. And these people are not old. If they were 40-ish or in their 40s, they're old. And looking at the picture, he doesn't talk anything about work, but they spend months sailing and a fortune on the boat. So where they get their money, I don't know. But they've been doing this for 20 years. So, you know, there were some younger people have money, but mostly, most of us have to wait till we get older.
Well, it's also a time commitment. And I mean, even if
Time
younger people
commitment.
have money, they
And
don't
the-
necessarily have the time if they have young children that are doing sports or whatever, which is the problem with our club is that we, you know, we're an older club because the younger people are chasing their kids all over town.
That's right. That's right. So,
Well, Richard, are you still there? Richard Cudmore? Is that you, Rich, with just the word rich?
Yeah, I muted myself. I am still
is that
here.
the tooth fairy?
That's a tooth fairy.
Well, I think that we should thank Ken and Arlene for this wonderful presentation.
It was fascinating. That was excellent. Thank you. Yes, a round of applause for
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're recording it. If I did it right, it's recording. So we can always, replay, make it available.
Right.
Well, let's put it on our website, Bill.
Right, already planned.
It was absolutely wonderful. It reminds me of the times I went cruising with my family, and I'm thinking maybe I'm going to have to ask you to sponsor me for a Corinthian, but
Be happy to do it, Linda.
thanks. I mean, it was really wonderful. It's just what we needed with this snow and cold weather, and it was wonderful. And Arlene, I'm sorry you only pop in and out over his shoulder every once in a while, but
I'm photogenic, so that's, I'm just hiding. But it's
I think
Kenny.
it's 29 people on, 29, probably.
well,
20.
we lost people now, but yeah.
Yeah.
But Arlene, I don't think people who haven't cruised for a long time realize what an awesome job Arlene does. Because I was always relegated to the galley because my mother got seasick. So I know what it's like to try and feed a family a home-cooked meal aboard a boat that's going somewhere and maybe coming into a harbor at dark. So Arlene, hats off to you for 2 months of doing that.
Thank you very much. I do have my little tricks, and so far so good. We haven't gotten food poisoning ever. So everything works.
Still alive.
We're doing.
I once burned my forehead because the boat was pitching, and it's on gimbals in the oven. I opened the oven and the cookie sheet came out.
Oh, God.
And I had like a burn across my forehead.
So if you want to continue, we can always do Arlene and Ken in the Chesapeake, because that trip is a very interesting trip.
That would be very interesting.
There'll be no.
Rich, book them.
That would be very interesting.
You got it.
That sounds great.
It sounds wonderful.
Let's hear it for the Chesapeake.
All right.
Thanks very much.
This was wonderful.
Thanks very much.
Stu, nice to almost meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
I don't know if we'll have a spring meeting, but maybe we'll have commissioning, Linda.
No, we will have a spring membership meeting. Definitely. It'll be on Zoom.
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
commissioning, you think maybe?
Yet to be seen. How many of you get your vaccines?
Tomorrow's the second one.
I had my second today.
I
right,
haven't had any,
Alan.
so I'm not up there yet. So I gotta wait a few more times. Stu, or should we call you Stewie?
You can go for that. That's good.
Stewie, maybe you'll come up and visit us one day, Stewie.
Oh, we've been there before. We've been at your club when Kenny was Commodore.
Kenny,
Oh.
okay. Well, I'm Commodore now, so I'm welcome. I'm inviting you back.
Okay, well, I appreciate the invitation, and the good Lord willing, we'll be there.
Stu was there once. I was racing with Mary Lou and Bill on Old Flame, and there was no wind. So Stu towed us back to the club.
How unusual.
Hey, Kenny, I remember that well.
Well, this has really been wonderful, and thank you, Richard, for putting this together. I don't know, where did Richard go? There he is. People keep moving. Thank you, Richard, and Richard, you book these two for another tour for the Chesapeake.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
I want
And I'm gonna have to put my daughter to bed. So thank you so much, Arlene and Ken. And it was wonderful.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Good night,
Thank you
everybody.
for the
I
invitation.
like the drinks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Hello,
Good
bye-bye.
night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night.